Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi there, this is Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance, where our business is the success of your business. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, facilitator, and your host of the Elevate Business podcast. The Elevate Business podcast is a journey of discovery fueled by the curiosity to genuinely understand what makes people tick when it comes to their professional path, choices made, and the personal characteristics that drive performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately success. The Elevate Business podcast is here to promote the enormous contributions of small and medium-sized businesses around the world by exploring the actions that make a workplace successful, the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of an organization, and how we build whole person performance from the ground up. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, growing our learning edges, and honoring our passions with a special guest who has elevated their business, overcome obstacles, and inspires others to do the same. So glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to episode number 24 of the Elevate Business podcast. Both myself, Ange McCabe, and Scott Rust are your hosts. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Jason Daley, venture building catalyst from Conduit Solutions. Jason has experience investing in a portfolio of startups and leveraging his business connections and experience to bring great ideas to market. He also empowers up-and-coming entrepreneurs as Vice President of Carleton University Alumni Association. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much, and a good day to you both.
Thank you. Likewise. So tell us about your company, a little bit about yourself, and some of your journey.
I appreciate the opportunity. I could spend a lot of time, but I have to give a notion. It was my mom's birthday was passed, and she always would ask me year over year, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was always consistently something towards, I want to have this business or that. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And in that, my business of Conduit Solutions is about aiding other entrepreneurs, from ideas to the formation of prototypes to concept, business model, and then going to engage the customer and delivering that business idea to a customer, because that's ultimately a business. And that is entrepreneurship, imagining new things and making them real. And that's what I do. I help entrepreneurs do so. And I say I absolutely love
it. So tell us, how did you step into your business?
It came by way of the ups and downs of other business. When I was working in a high-tech startup, we grew from, I was the 10th employee to closer to 200, and I was even the MC of the Christmas party. And I got laid off because we were going to be off projections. The market was not going to adopt the technology, software, and hardware specifically for a couple of years. So they had massive layoffs. And I was thinking, wow, here's my career high flying. What do I do now? I'm taking a whole reset. And I thought, well, why don't I just do what I've learned and do it for others? And I was humbled early on. Some of my first customers jumping into advisory and business consulting for small business were mompreneurs. I end up getting referred into a mompreneur group, and I end up helping a book, a wedding planner, and felt toys. And I had all this blue chip, big thinking and business and working for larger companies. And I said, how do I just really focus on what truly matters? And it was always the customer value that it would be obtained. Let's just boil down everything is what is the customer value and going to pay for?
Right.
And how do I minimize the time requirement, especially for the mompreneurs, to get that done? So to accelerate, that's the term catalyst. To be a venture catalyst is to help accelerate the process of taking ideas to market. So from there, I grew my portfolio of projects from mompreneurs, obviously, and end up working with my network of peers in tech ventures and going through prototype projects and saying, okay, that's a great idea. How do we get it done? And the advent of certain things like the business model canvas and agile didn't quite exist when I started, but those things were readily the tools that I adopted and start integrating into my consulting practice. So I would put those forward and said, oh, you have these ideas. Well, let's model out what the customer values and what you imagine it to be, and let's try and test it to see if it resonates. And that became what we all know is sort of the agile methodology. In fact, not everyone knows agile. It's a sort of a term for taking concepts in technological terms and modeling it so that you have the least complicated element available for your customer to consider. And that's kind of the prototype phase that allows for that first inspiration of an entrepreneur's idea to seem real and tangible, and they can give it to a customer and for the feedback loop that's needed to help improve it. Yeah. So I may have answered multiple questions there. I apologize.
Well, I think it just shows to the experience that you bring to the table and just the passion you have for helping entrepreneurs bring ideas to life, and having something and making it more tangible and actually actionable in the marketplace. And so I'm curious, what has been the role of performance what role has performance played in working with these entrepreneurs and kind of growing their business?
The question about performance for me has an intersection of passion, you've already mentioned, and it is something that has to be beholden in me before I can really truly take on a very complex project with another entrepreneur. And then it's about the purpose. It's the why that I have interest is that it's answered. And I love helping entrepreneurs realize their dreams and being one myself, but looking at the purpose behind the business itself that I'm working with. And then lastly, it's the people. Will this affect people in a positive way? Will it have a positive impact? All that together, if all those three are together, I find that's the performance element that I'm looking for. And for me to be ready for that, I have to go through a question of evaluating, some values that I have for myself, and then the values I see that the business and entrepreneur are looking to infuse in their business. And if there's alignment, then that means I can be a good performer inside of an engagement with that new venture that I'm going to work alongside. So it takes a lot of self-reflection to understand those values, and then a lot of question that I have to put forward to the entrepreneur about their purposes, their whys. It's not always apparent. As you get mature as an entrepreneur, you tend to get focused on more of your spirit of self. That's where I find there's the best alignment, when it's fulfilling something in you, and not just because I need to earn a living. That's not something I find is inspiring. Is because I want to see a new material thing change for this group of customers or this set of people. And that's why I get very involved in communities as well. I find those entrepreneurs because they're passion projects. That's often how I get referred, or I get referred from other entrepreneurs I work with. Is here's a passionate entrepreneur that could probably be really aligned with your missions and values. So that's kind of what I do. That altogether, that's performance to me: passion, purpose, values. Yeah.
And the alignment piece. It's so important. Really appreciate your offering, Jason, in the sense of you ensure that there's a fit with not just your business operations and the clients or the services that you're providing, but there's alignment with you. And that's really important in showing up as a quote unquote coach or even consultant in this landscape. So when it comes down to the you, how do you fuel your performance?
My performance, I would say I'm like probably every entrepreneur. I am a self-critic of, I don't feel like I exercise nearly enough, but I do it almost every day. I got a puppy over the COVID pandemic, so I could do walks with my family. And I love to play sports, team sports specifically, because I feel the camaraderie. I'm an extrovert type personality, and so I like to be interacting with my fellow sports buddies, and I'm missing that during this break. So I have more criticism of myself during this pandemic than normal because I'm not doing the things I normally do. Thus, I need to find ways to change, and that means more work and reflection, taking in podcasts, jumping on conversations with those who are doing the things I'd like to see for myself. And so that means taking a note from my own sheet in business. I have to do it as an individual, right? What are my values? How do I impart them? Go after it, get it done, and hustle.
And that's so interesting. It's almost like due to the pandemic for you, Jason, you've had to, or chosen to, I should say, look at your alignment. So, you had to kind of your routines and your habits set in place. COVID hits, and then it's almost like, you're with everybody in the sense of, okay, what do I value? What can I hold on to? What can I let go? And what can I fill my cup with? And that's so important.
Yeah. It forced me to focus. I really pared down the breadth of the work. I focused on just a few ventures that I had the most alignment and the energy feels I get from cooperating and collaborating with that entrepreneur. And that fills some of the void of the interactions I normally get from, say, the entrepreneurial community where I live. So it's important.
And so kind of going back to your journey here, Jason, and just looking at that transition from, being an entrepreneur to becoming a serial entrepreneur or a portfolio investor, what did that transition look like? I mean, what were some key points or moments you kind of reflect back on?
Well, to reflect, it didn't happen by, full strategic planning. It happened because the journey wasn't done. I enjoy the journey that I joined with other entrepreneurs, and to see that my effectiveness in that was pretty much done, but the company had much more growth to be had, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that meant I'm going to bow out. My skill sets are best leveraged in the inertia, the art of the startup, I call it, when you have to formulate your ideas, your business models, your network, and your relationships with customers. Then the growth and scale is more operational. I have that skill set, but it's not something I get energy from. And it meant to me, if I want to stay on their journey further, I need to probably just invest, because that's typically the next threshold. Growth requires resources. And my personal and capital, like my expert capital, wasn't going to be leveraged anymore than some of my financial capital would be. And so I've opened a wider aspect of my ability to help entrepreneurs by accessing financial resources. So there's three capitals that are really important for an early venture. It's the network capital, the people that are involved early on in their relationships and ecosystems you tap into to grow a business. Then there's the intellectual capital, the idea itself, the individuals are contributing towards the concept. And then the lastly is the financial capital, which is the fuel that helps pay for the resources to accumulate and put thrust into a rocket ship idea, hopefully. And so this year I focused on a few of them so that I didn't get too dissipated in my efforts, and I could put more tangible efforts to improving my operational ability on top of my startup abilities. And I think I'm better for it, more rounded, staying in the game much longer, past just the startup phase, but into the growth phase. And I appreciate that, because I'm delving into more learning opportunities and that I otherwise would have just eschewed and said, no, I'm going to focus on where my strengths are. I'd build more breadth.
And in that building, what has been your biggest learning as an entrepreneur?
The biggest learning is it's not what other external folks to the entrepreneur journey. It's not a line that goes straight up. It is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, this around. It's wrought with challenges. It's probably one of the hardest career paths, and nothing's certain. So my ultimate learning was be comfortable with uncertainty, be comfortable with risk, and be committed to a vision.
Right.
The satisfaction from realizing a vision thwarts just about anything. And I liken it to the hero's journey in most cinematic or film or TV. Everyone champions the journey, but it's always wrought with challenges. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an interesting story. So you have to get through risk, uncertainty, the challenges, to get through the end of your hero's journey.
Right.
So I look at everything in that sort of context.
Yeah. I think
And
Scott
so
wanted to
how do you get through that uncertainty? Like, was that something that you've always been good at dealing with, or is this something that's been built over time? How do you handle yourself facing uncertainty and risk?
I got comfortable through a progression of setbacks. So challenges and setbacks and failure points, like being laid off with a high-flying startup because they weren't going to get to market on time. That's something that you learn that, whatever you suspect may not be certain. So be comfortable with uncertainty. I gained that from living it, one. Two, I had support systems from my family, including my wife. And then I built a foundation. I built some breadth, and this leads to the portfolio investing. I built some other assets that provided me income streams so that I had more certainty on what I can count on. I made certain that when I developed some real estate rental properties, that I had income streams that were parsed out every 2 weeks, because bills come in generally every 2 to 4 weeks, so that I could meet those needs. And so I kept building foundations. And as I added every different business venture and I wanted to stay on the journey, if I had capital to deploy, well, then I added as something that would be a potential asset in my future in my wealth building. And that's how I did it. So I had to take some strategic steps, but other ones are just comfort. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. I read somewhere that there's this 3 to 5% are very natural entrepreneurs that cannot be anything but, and they just live with the fact that they want freedom, and so thus they absorb risk. And then there's another 8 to 12% or more that you can train to be entrepreneurs, because their idea and their brilliance is so tuned to what's needed in the market that you can build a pathway for them to become an entrepreneur, but it's not innate in them. So I tend to be one of the innate entrepreneurs. So that's fortunate for me, but my uncertainty often comes in my ability to be an investor. I can't meet every opportunity because I don't have unlimited funds. Yeah,
exactly. And so what about working with a team? So how would you go about either advising your clients or even in your own experience, ensuring that there's an environment for team members or employees to thrive?
Great question. And certainly for your podcast audience, team is ultimately the critical assessment of any valuable venture. Do they have the support system and belief system and values that they share uniformly between them? Because when it's in alignment, which is key, you can get through just about any challenge and setback, as long as you're committed through the end game, the end of the journey, seeing the vision through. A team that's supportive in the fact that they don't always have to be on, that you can talk about what's happening outside of your work life.
Exactly.
But you can set time for that, stand-ups, or maybe a conversation in the evening or a weekend check-in that's just about things that aren't family, because we're people too. But in ventures, you get so wrapped up in all the detail, you can forget that there's individuals with families and lives that are challenged, and that you need to do self-care, but also care of your team. And that's a cultural aspect. So as companies are growing, I'm putting more emphasis on how to improve culture. So taking care and to be empathetic and to hear and ask of the team members, how are they feeling right now in these challenging times? Do they have the resources they need to get this done? It's a inquisitiveness that the leadership can't just be focused only on the business plan elements, but focus on where your individual team members' needs are being met. And the more you can integrate culture into your growth, the better, because you don't have hiccups on team turnover and churn. You have people that are aligned or growing with the company. Yeah.
Ange and I are both smiling because part of our focus with intuitive performance isn't so much about focusing on the person or focusing on the job itself, but rather it's focusing on the person behind the job. And how can you, if you can empower that person, then they'll be able to show up and achieve extraordinary results for your company.
Yeah.
Great insight. Oh, that's so needed.
Yes. And to add to that, it's really resonating with us as well, because it's not just about what's written in your policies or what's on your wall. It's ensuring that there's connectivity between what's going on day to day in your Teams rooms or your Zoom rooms, as well as what's written on your walls.
Yes, so true. Your actions speak louder than your words, as the adage goes. Yes.
And what's the cost when have you encountered situations where you found a disconnect between that purpose or the values or the mission within a team? And what has been the impact of that?
That dissonance, if it doesn't get addressed, grows, or it finds itself in other facets. It could relate into resentment or definitely being off peak performance. It slows progress because there's something unsaid or unattended to. When I'm working as a management consultant, that's one of the first things we do. We do an assessment with individuals individually, and then we do it by team. And we look to see if there's any messaging that was being shared that was just not in concert with the goals of the organization. And so that's something I haven't had a chance to do in a little while because I'm working on startups with individual founders. So there's only select. So the team dynamic hasn't come into play when I was doing management consulting. Every team as a group and then as an organization has some different paradigm effects on the culture overall. So leadership is required, and that means a lot of training. So I refer often to leadership coaches to help address those dissonance so that it can be remedied. That's generally I refer it out because I wouldn't say I'm the expert. I can recognize it, but remedying it, leave it to the pros.
That's wonderful. Something that just came up for me, Jason. So when it comes to working with, founding partners or startups in this landscape that we're in this remote workforce arena that we're playing in, have you noticed any trends or major shifts?
In this sort of era of COVID and the pandemic, the shifts are naturally as the technology adoption curve is just shifted. It's by some as much as a decade, especially from adoption of technology tools from the remote workforce. I just made a recent investment in a company that does a remote platform for managing employee productivity. And it's called Transparent Business. And it made sense because this was timely that everyone is now mandated to be home and to work effectively. How do you manage that? And how do managers go through that? There's not a book that's been written that everyone can easily adopt in a method to say, hey, do it this way. Technology will help. And that's where I see the technology adoption curve. I'm seeing in a business I'm currently growing in the leadership called Measured Risk. We're seeing the vulnerability of supply chains, vulnerability of technology tools. So you have to understand risk from that point, that you have attack surfaces that bad actors, or just like some of the recent cyber attacks, namely the SolarWinds, really impacted a number of large organizations and supply chains. And the pandemic requirements for PPE equipment also show the fragility that we weren't ready for calamity of this size and grandeur. So that's what we're seeing, is that we have to handle and look at risk differently. And you have to adopt technology platforms quickly. So you have to support your employees on transition and change. And that's what I'm seeing. How about yourself? Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, of course. Go for it. It's a two-way conversation. For us, at the start of COVID, we've seen a lot of our clients that were very, very steady and very dominant in the sense of knowing what they wanted and where they want to go and what type of help they needed. And, we'll never forget in that week of March, 18th-ish, it was just a halt. And we were actually getting ready to go in and talk about compensation planning for one of our clients. And I'm laughing because it's ironic and unfortunate, to be quite frank. So, what we did was we seen that our clients went from very steady, ready to take on risk, to very fearful and uncertain. And so from there, it was like, okay, how can we ensure that we're helping the individuals, teams, professionals, leaders? And so we did a couple things. So one thing was looking at the types of projects that we had on the docket and converting that into more of like a retainer agreement. So we're focusing on employee relations conversations. We're focusing on safety. We're focusing on things like, okay, how can we project a month out instead of a year out? And what does that look like for our peopling? For another organization, we had to look at some restructuring, unfortunately. And, it was a situation that was called for, but we made sure that we mitigated as much risk from an operational and a people side of things, and that it was done humanely. And then the other piece was too, just around, education and coming through this in a persistent manner. So oftentimes we found ourselves wearing that coach hat to say, okay, like what's coming up here? What fears are coming up? How can we help out? And by the way, we're all in this together. And what we noticed, from a business perspective is that our community got so much closer than we ever would have thought. Like in past, you would have to send an email, do a phone call, meet up with someone, have a coffee, schmooze, and then maybe get into a closer connection. Whereas now it's like, hey, do you know someone? Yeah, I do. And it's building on taking a bit more risk around trust. And I feel like, we've built a lot of partnerships in a very strong manner. So for us, we're seeing twofold in the sense of community, and then also looking at projects from a realistic perspective and making sure that our clients are taken care of. And then we're also seeing our counterparts. So a lot of, other consultants or coaches that we're working with, they're in the same space. And it's really switched from, it's switched from kind of project building to relationship building, which I found actually refreshing.
Oh, amazing. That sounds like the dynamic adjustment on the fly is sort of a absolute for anyone who's an entrepreneur. You have to be able to adjust on the fly, and best foot forward, best attitudes, I find make that transition easiest. Thanks for sharing that, by the way.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
Yeah. And so just in wrapping up here, Jason, we always like to hear from our guests. What are the 3 words of inspiration that you'd want the world to hear?
Pursue your passion with purpose for the right people in your heart. Passion, purpose, and the people.
That's fantastic.
That's what I would.
Yeah.
I love it. Give me goosebumps.
I know. I was just going to say, is it appropriate to say I have goosebumps right now? I don't know.
It's fueled me, and it's how I choose my projects. It's you notice there's all in business. There's profit, and if it was a 4th word, I'd add that. But it's all those other 3 that set my priority first. Yeah. Because business does need profit to be growing and being successful to realize vision. But those are the 3. Yeah. And if anyone wants to read a book to really key in on it, Viktor Frankl, The Man's Search for Meaning. It's when I first read that it became my first adult awareness of my purpose. Yeah. And I read that decades ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you've asked me to join your podcast today and have a dialogue like this. So I hope to be working with you certainly going forward, because we have a a very good alignment of skills to help businesses and ventures grow.
Fantastic. Yeah, we tend to agree for sure, Jason. And we really appreciate you sharing your entrepreneurial insights with Intuitive Performance and our subscribers. And for those who would like to learn more about your business, we're going to provide a link to our company's profile on the Elevate Business podcast. Title page, Take Good Care. Thank you very much for all of our subscribers to tuning in into another great episode of the Elevate Business podcast, Take Good Care. Thanks for listening to the Elevate Business podcast. I hope you enjoyed the program. You can subscribe to future podcasts at intuitiveperformance.com, where you can also sign up for webinars and learn more about professional coaching and our facilitation solutions available to help fire up your whole person performance skills and drive actions for success. Until next time, stay true to you and take care of each other. We are all better together. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.